Hey folks, we're going to start a series on small game loads. Over the next 6 weeks or so, we will be testing 3 different loads with 2 different criteria out of 2 different shotguns with 2 different chokes each. The first of 3 loads that we'll be testing are the Federal High Brass game loads. These are a 20 gauge load. They're 2 3/4 inches and they have an ounce of number 5 shot moving at 1,220 feet per second. There's the top of the box. And there's the back. It shows the cutaway of the shell. So that's the first load that we'll be testing. We'll be testing that this week. And let's go up to the table and we will look at the 2 shotguns that we'll be running this 6-week test out of. So here we have our combination of shotguns that we're going to be using to test this Federal High Brass game loads. Here we have a Remington SPR 210. It is a 20 gauge side by side, and it has a 5.85 choke in it. Now this particular Remington was not produced by Remington. This gun was made in Russia by a company that I'm not even going to attempt to say the name of because I have a hard enough time talking in English. Here we have a Stevens. It is a model 512. It's an over and under 20 gauge. And it also has a 5.85 choke in it. So basically we're shooting the same shells and the same chokes, 5.85s, in both of these shotguns. But even at that, they're going to perform differently. It's just the nature of things because they're made differently. And even these chokes, these are both 5.85 chokes, but they're manufactured by different people. And that will make them perform differently. Alright, let's take it to the range and see what we get. I have here by Remington SPR 210. I have in the left barrel a choke that's choked at 5.85. So at 30 yards, we have a target. It is a bullseye target. It has a 12-inch outside ring, and that's what we'll be patterning these loads on. Alright, let's get started with the Federal High Brass game loads. Alright, let's see what we got. Alright folks, here we have the target for the Federal High Brass game loads shot out of the Remington SPR 210, the side by side. This particular load should have 170 pellets in it. We have 37 on the target, which is a touch over 20%. We have pellets from the bullseye out to the 12-inch ring in each ring, but we have squirrel-sized holes in the pattern. One here and one here. So at a closer range, it probably will be an acceptable squirrel load. But we're looking for a load that is capable of getting up in the trees around here, and the trees around here are around over 100 feet tall. You cannot see up to the top of a 100-foot tall tree, but 30 yards is 90 feet. That's a good compromise. This load probably would not be the best load. I have here Air Stevens, model 512. We have a choke that is choked at 5.85 in the over barrel. We have a target in here at 30 yards. It is a bullseye target with a 12-inch ring, and that's what we'll be patterning these number 5s on. Alright, there we go. Let's see what we got. Here we have the target for the Federal High Brass game loads, shot out of the Stevens 512 with the 5.85 choke. And in this particular target, we have 47 of 170 pellets. So we have right at 30% of the total load from 30 yards in a 12-inch circle. We have pellets a good concentration here at the bullseye, and we have pellets all the way out to the 12-inch ring. So this is a load that would go up into a good tall hickory tree and get him out of there. All right, folks, we've brought the targets back up to the table that we shot with the Federal high brass game loads. Here we have the target that we shot out of the Stevens 512 with the 585 choke in it. And I believe we have 170 pellets in that load, roundabout, and we have about 30, not quite 30% on the target. We have 47 of them, I believe, on this target. And we have a nice concentration of pellets at point of aim. Had this been a little squirrel sitting on a limb, he'd have been on his way to the stew pot. We do have a squirrel size hole here, up through here. And we have a few smaller holes. But for the most part, we got fairly good coverage out of the Stevens 512 with its 585 choke. And here we have the Remington SPR 210 side by side with its 585 choke. And we didn't get nearly the performance that we got out of the Stevens. We got a touch over 20% of the load in the 12-inch circle. We have fewer pellets in the center. It probably still would have brought the squirrel out the tree, but it's possible old Tough Squirrel could have shrugged that off and got away. You would have had to have a second shot on him. We definitely have squirrel size gaps in this pattern. So I would use the high brass and the Stevens 512 if I was going to use it. Well, folks, the Federal high brass game loads did okay in the Stevens 512. It was fairly disappointing in the Remington SPR 210 because I prefer side-by-side guns. The Stevens definitely was the better of the two. So we'll be continuing this series. I believe the next one to come up will be some Kents. And all these are going to be 20 gauge, 2 3/4 inch loads with an ounce of 5s in them. So until next time, y'all stay safe in the squirrel woods, and God bless.